Uncertainty, pressure, change. The people who navigate this world tend to have something in common. They've been at the edge and they know what that taught them. I'm Charlie Peschardt and this is the Resilient Edge podcast. Today on the Resilient Edge podcast, I have Zehra Rizvi, and I will kick straight off by welcoming you and asking you question number one, which is your take on how we know each other.
Hi, it's so good to be here. I love that you are doing this. I think it's so needed. And it gives us a great chance to catch up on our 6-7 year friendship. Is that what it is? Because we met in September 2017. And I'm talking about, we were in the British Virgin Islands. We were both responding to hurricanes Irma and Maria, and I think you got there like 2 days before I did. And when we first actually spoke to each other, both of us were smoking outside, which I no longer do. You have quit, I have quit. And we were there with our other friend, Tom. And yeah, the three of us were just chit-chatting, and you were with Rubicon at that point, and I had come in with the British Red Cross, and then all three of us ended up leaving the outfits with which we had ended up in the British Virgin Islands and continued into a much longer, beautiful friendship, but also amazing career progressions, I guess we could call them. But yes, that's my version of how we met.
There we go. Yeah, as you say, then all came back to move from the response phase to the longer term recovery. And I say this to everyone that I catch up with about those were wild days. There's a lot going on there.
Yeah.
But yes, you came out with the British Red Cross initially, and that was the latest step for you in your humanitarian career. So tell me, did you always know that you wanted to get into that humanitarian space?
No. And this, I think my family gets super shocked. And I've been now doing this for 21 years, actually. And I started with the Asian tsunami. And I was out in Sri Lanka. And I was really interested in food before that. But I always had this need to want to, as we say, help people. Not really understanding or knowing what that would entail in its entirety. And for whatever reason, I cannot explain it. I've always been really attracted to conflict, disaster. So those are the places where I wanted to go and help people. My mother is an emergency physician, and perhaps it came from there. I don't really know, but I remember from my teenage years, I was like, I want to help people, but I also have had this twin track thing about food, and I'm super interested in food. So everybody actually thought I was going to be either a chef or that I was going to own a restaurant, which neither of those two things. I love to cook and I continue to do that. But yeah, I like to tell people I became an accidental aid worker. I had no idea of what the whole entire system entailed and what it looked like. My undergraduate degree was actually in filmmaking and anthropology. So there was something around storytelling, around history, around community, around people, but not really seeing how and what that was going to look like. But literally as soon as, I went out to Sri Lanka to help back in 2005, February. Yes, it was 2005, February. The Boxing Day tsunami, as we know, Boxing Day 2004. So I was there very soon after, and I fell into this work and realized I absolutely 100% adored it. I became a morning person, which nobody ever thought was going to happen. That was like a big pivot that happened also. And as soon as that first mission, as we call it, ended of mine, I was working out in the east of Sri Lanka. The country director was just like, you obviously love this, go get your master's now. So that's what I ended up doing. And that's how the career shifted and started for me in this. But this was not something that I'd actually ever dreamed that I would be doing, but I cannot imagine doing anything else.
The vigor with which you threw yourself into that first opportunity to get that support straight away to go and get the master's qualification. I remember coming out of the military and trying to get into the humanitarian space myself, not having a master's in a relevant field was a really big barrier, actually. So, and which organization was that you were there with?
Red Cross. I started out with the Red Cross will always be my natural home. Again, I literally was just traveling around the east of Sri Lanka, and this guy, Dave Overy, who I have so much to thank for. He was my first boss, West Ham fan, actually. He had this really thick sort of accent also from the east side of London. And he basically was like, you know what? I had zero experience, right? I was just out there being like a do-gooder or whatever. And he's like, you're somebody we could use out here. And I was like, to do what? But he trained me up and did things. And and he happened to be working for the German Red Cross. We had very few Germans actually working with the German Red Cross at that time. But that's sort of, yeah. And after I did my master's, I started out with the British Red Cross, and I considered them, even though I'm an American, my national society, and I'm still connected to them. I still go back and do bits and pieces with them. But the easy way to explain the career sort of thing was 6 years Red Cross, a bunch of different sorts of jobs, etc. with them, a lot of consulting also with them. Then I was 6 years, probably just like an independent sort of consultant. I did one NGO, I did government, which was with the BVI that we did. And then I've been with the UN for the last 5, 6 years, something like that. So yeah, those are my chunks and I've worked with pretty much every single actor at this point in time.
Yeah, I think one of the things that struck me when we were first talking about what was going to happen in the BVI was how experienced you were, and the different places and different organizations you'd worked either within or alongside. It was definitely a longer and more illustrious list than mine at the time, I think. When you went from being part of the Red Cross to then doing the consulting roles, particularly, obviously you and I worked in the Ministry of, or consulting to the Ministry of Health, Social Development and the BVI in the recovery phase, particularly. How did you find that compared to being part of a big multi-cross-national institution?
Yeah, my whole career, if we want to talk about pivots and things like that and how you adjust to new circumstances, my whole entire career has been exactly that. It's really difficult for me to explain a CV because they're like, oh, it looks like you jumped around a lot. And I'm like, that's not, yes, it does look like that, but it's not necessary. It's within the same sort of structures, I would say. It is so different being a staff member than it is being a consultant. The ministry job, I felt more like staff.
What would you say are the similarities and the differences in the mindset that's required for those two different types of role?
Yeah, great question. And there's actually a lot that goes into this. And I've got so many colleagues, especially with the UN and the aid agencies and everything that's blown up around that right now, where they have been staff members for 20 plus years. And all of a sudden they're having to move into the world of consulting. It is the subject matter for them will be more or less the same, right? So we have some similarities there in terms of how the work needs to be carried out. You've got similarities there. The biggest change, I think, that I've seen that people really struggle with, and I honestly did struggle way in the beginning when I first became a consultant, was I wanted to explore every single cool idea. When you're a consultant, you really have to be more like a project manager also and be like, this is the deliverable, this is what I'm going to do. And if you end up working with your colleagues from before, because they know what you are able to do. So they'll be like, oh, can we also look at it this way? And then you have to be like, actually, no. If we want to, you got to give me more days to be able to look at it. And there is this thing about, this is the project, this is what I'm going to do, and this is where it finishes. Whereas if you're a staff member, you can go off in many different directions and you have a longer time frame at which you're looking at. With a consultancy, it's like you have 30 days, you have 60 days, 15 days sometimes, and that's that. You're not thinking about who will be able to, or you don't necessarily, a lot of times you're not hired to think about how are we going to take this forward institutionally also, right? And that can be a really exciting part of the job. So you also have to let go of that. But then you don't have to get involved in a lot of the politics when you're a consultant. So there are pros and cons. You have a lot more freedom with your time. And it's so fun because I've gone between consultant and staff so much, and they are 100% different skill sets that are required. And I tell everybody it is not as easy as you think to move from staff to consultant or consultant to staff. The grass is always greener on the other side every time I'm looking at it, where I'm just like, I would love to get a regular paycheck and not have to look at this deliverable by deliverable. But when I'm a staff member, I'm just like, oh, I just want to work from anywhere. I just want to take a week off and just go. I don't want to be involved in these politics. So it very much is, different. So a lot of similarities, a lot of differences. And it does require a mind shift, I think, that people should be super aware of when they're moving from staff to consultant rather than the other way around.
I think the consulting world is really interesting versus the staff comparison. I look at organizational resilience a lot in some of my consulting work, but also it's been a full-time role of mine as well in some organizations. And then how people are buying into what the organization's trying to do, organizational culture, behaviors, values, all matter if you're a full-time staff member. They matter far less if you're a consultant, but they can really affect your work still
This is
as
the
a
thing.
consultant.
Yeah, because you don't know what you're producing is actually going to get implemented or not, and then you have to learn to not care. And it's really hard when you're coming from a purpose-driven background to be like, oh, you just have to hand it over. And you have to trust that the people who hired you, that your clients are going to somehow implement these brilliant ideas that you've just given them. So yeah, there are pros and cons again to both those ways of working.
And criticism I've seen quite a lot recently leveled at the consulting world about, oh, we've paid for this thing to get done. You've done all the work of how it needs to be done, but we've not paid you to stay and implement it. We haven't implemented it. That's your fault as a consultant. And you say, not really. You've got to look at the through life of that transformation project or whatever it is. And if you don't have the resources at the back end to make that happen, it won't happen. However good a consultant you engage, it doesn't matter whether it's McKinsey or me, it's not going to happen. So, and I've seen that with one project particularly stands out in my mind. I won't name it, but there was a lot of effort went into it and a lot of good thinking went into it and a lot of buy-in from everybody. But when it was finished, technical expert went, I went, and
that happens so much. That's exactly what I find frustrating then around consultancies. But I think one of the things that you said that's so critically important, because this is what I was saying before also, I like both. I like consulting and I like a staff position. It very much depends on where you are in your time of life and in terms of what is going to work for you. So having both skill sets, I think, and experiences in both is super important so that when you need to move to one to the other, you can do that a lot easier than not. But yes, but this not having implementers within, etc., it becomes like incredibly annoying. But here's the other thing that I've seen, and hopefully you will see this one day with one of your projects, is because I've done a lot of consulting. The work you do may not ever be wasted. It might just not be the correct time for it. And you may see it come forward in 2-3 years. And this is something I've also observed over my long career now, that an idea that you had 5 years ago, maybe it was ahead of its time. Maybe it just wasn't the right time. All these confluences of forces and all these things need to come together for something to actually move forward. I work in social protection a lot. So that is, think about like stimulus checks, etc. Nobody thought something like that was actually going to happen. Like the governments were all of a sudden going to start responding like this. And it was amazing what governments were doing and just giving out money. There was so much behind the scenes work that had been happening for years that finally push came to shove and governments were like, actually, we can totally do this. We've got everything ready to go. And they managed to push it forward. And BVI is actually a brilliant example. So the work I had been doing with the government after Irma and Maria and with Petrona Davies, who I absolutely adore. She's such a visionary. She had all of this stuff and she brought me on after Irma and Maria to be able to support them, to look at how do we support our people after an emergency if this happens to us again. What are we going to do? And they were taking I'd come in with the Red Cross, as I mentioned before, and I was doing cash programming. I was one of the only, I was the only, I was going to say one of the, but I was the only cash expert on the islands at that time. And we set up something we call the Joint Cash Platform, right? So everybody was not everybody, 10% of the population we covered with basic income. 3 organizations working together, Red Cross, the government, Catholic Relief Services. So, we set up this like beautiful, such a gorgeous little project. We can link to it at some place if anybody wants more information on that. There's a case study that was done around it. This was 2018, because 2017 was the hurricane. Through 2018, we were doing this. And then I was working through 2018, 2019 with the government to solidify some of these systems and be like, what do we do? How do we look at it? And then when COVID hit, guess what? They have everything. They took the framework of what we had done, and there wasn't any of the dilly-dallying that happened at the beginning of Irma and Maria in terms of, oh, can we do this? Can we not? Cabinet this time was just like, guys, we know how to do this. Let's go. Let's do it. And it just went. And it was really incredible to see that an idea that you had before, et cetera, and systems that you had been setting up and they kept stopping and stalling, they just went and they did it. And it was really, it was really amazing.
It's quite an incredible project. And like you say, the timing, no such thing as an overnight success, right? It's got to do the work. And then sometimes that's through it comes to fruition and sometimes it doesn't. But this is the preparedness world, right? You can't only prepare for exactly what you know is coming and when it's coming, or it probably wouldn't be a crisis or a disaster. So
Correct.
got to have the systems and the skills in place.
Yep.
And then that's an interesting piece about, say, I look at organizational and societal resilience within that world, having the systemic strength so that when the time comes along, it's not all reliant on individual knowledge and charismatic leadership, but there is actually a structure that will survive the circumstances. It's key. How did you find building that side of the system rather than just the technical cash bit, but the actual solid foundation that means that should be available regardless of who is sat in which chair in a ministry on a given day?
Yeah, I do think it matters who's sat in which chair. So I do want to start with, because people are always just, let's look. So one of the fallacies that I have seen, because people are like, oh, it shouldn't be dependent on an individual. Unfortunately, a lot of times, honestly, these things are actually dependent on individuals. As much charismatic leaders or just somebody who's, I am going to put my foot behind this and drive it. You need those sorts of individuals, but they need the systems in order for it to happen. So I think both are equally important. 100% matters who's sitting in which chair at which moment. It's just when you get all the correct people sitting in the chairs, you're like, this is amazing. This is magic. The kinds of systems, it's precedence, I think, for the kind of work that I do. Governments want to be able to see that other governments have done this sort of work. And I guess agencies want to see that somebody else has done this before. So somebody does have to step up and be like, we're going to do this. And I think emergencies, disasters, etc., are brilliant for bringing forward those sorts of innovations and being like, okay, we're going to try something new. We're going to go ahead and take the risk. We're going to go ahead and do this. The most valuable thing after the BBI experience, my work with UNICEF, etc., it was going around and supporting governments, a lot in the Middle East, but then globally also, to be like, how do you build your systems? What are we looking at? What do we do? Making sure that your data systems are functioning and ready and good to go. Making sure your social workers. I think that is such a key component, the people part of it. For me, it was social workers, but any sort of people, how resilient are your people? When we talk about a community as well, when we talk about society, when we talk about an organization, it's so much around people. And this is where I think organizations really, regardless of what the organization is, government, aid agency, a restaurant, whatever it is, are your people resilient? What do we mean, or what do I at least mean by resilience? It's, can you adapt, and do you have enough built into yourself to be flexible? Do you have a growth mindset as well? I think all of these things really do contribute to how you're going to deal with adversity when it does come around. I think, are you born with it? Are you not born with it? I don't think that's really a question to ask and look at. I think it's a combination of both. It is something that can be learned, and it is something that you are a little bit born with. Also, some people will be more resilient than others. And I think that is a personality type going in there. But I find myself to be an incredibly resilient person, but I get tired. I know that there are things that I've had to learn in terms of how to keep myself resilient within all of this. So this is the system of self where I'm just like, I know I need enough sleep, like very simple things. I know I need enough sleep. I know I need to be doing something outside of my day job also that keeps me interested, that keeps me growing. What is the word that I'm looking at? I'm so dogmatic about growth, whereas like, I must be growing because I also know I get bored, but it keeps my brain sharper. That is where I see like resilience also coming and happening.
There is a lot there. And I think the piece about resilience is always interesting. It is a buzzword, and I think it does mean so many things to so many people. And indeed, there are genuinely very many definitions of the word resilience, depending on the context. It's whether you're talking about in nature, in engineering, in human life, it does depend. With regards to that resilience piece, I think the growth mindset bit in particular comes to the fore for me as you were speaking. The elements that people seem to have within resilience, the elements that seem to keep coming up are about how you respond to a setback. Different phrases around that, failing forward, or how you're going to pick yourself up, or whatever it might be. But fundamentally, growth mindset, I think, summarizes a lot of those very well. As of the organizational piece, you're talking about fundamentally most organizations are very dependent on who is sat in which chair.
Yeah.
So, but the systems behind them need to be resilient as well, so that when that chair has the right bum on it. What do you think, would you say, that you've seen where organizations get this right versus where some of the shortcomings are? And that could either be from how they go about managing a response or how they go about preparing for a response they don't yet know is coming.
Yeah, I think the problem is that organizations don't prepare, or they're looking for somebody to blame. And oftentimes, like a category hurricane, Cat 5 hurricane, you cannot
Mm.
prepare for something like that. Mistakes will be made. And it's exactly what you were just saying, right? It's so much about how you will pick yourself up after something has failed. There should not be finger pointing. There shouldn't be that we tried something. And I find organizations also, what I think organizations get wrong is that they're not willing to take risks. It's okay. Try something new, try something different. I can understand when public sector doesn't do that so much, right? Because they've got a population that they are responsible to, tax dollars, or I can understand why politicians don't want to do something like that because of votes and what have you. But that's, I think, where we fail, because it's in disaster, there's always opportunity. That's where innovations are coming from. I think we could be doing so many cooler things within that space, but there's such a lack of imagination, which hampers a lot of creativity, which hampers the growth mindset that we're talking about. And this is where I really see, I would love to see, so a lot of private sector companies will have their research and development funds,
Yeah.
R&D. And R&D is so amazing for this reason, because you can try new things and you can do it in this thing of failing forward and just trying. Yeah. For me, this is one of the biggest things. In fact, I think I just stopped working at the end of January, and I said, I want to fail fast forward. That is going to be my mantra over the next 6 months, because I want to see what is it that I want to do, not do. All those crazy ideas I have where I'm just like, let's try it out. When I was younger, I was able to fail faster and I would just try things. I feel like I had a lot more chutzpah even to just be like, let's just go out there and let me just try it and let me just do this. I still think I'm that person, but I've noticed the more senior I got, sometimes I was just like, oh, it just felt like the failure was just going to be greater somehow. And I want to get out of that mindset that I seem to have caught myself up in. How do we normalize making mistakes? I guess that's really what I'm asking.
There's a lot there. I think there's a couple of things. One, that age piece, I think, is a massive factor, isn't it? People do become more fearful as they get older. I think of a lot of workers, but time, money, emotional energy has been invested in getting to where you are today. So
Yeah.
the potential loss is higher. In terms of that, how do we normalize a willingness to take risk, a willingness to fail? It's a very difficult thing, I think, because we are so quick to jump on people who have tried to do something and it's gone wrong. Having said that, the best teams that I've worked in have absolutely been able to create an environment where if something does go wrong, it's not going to be a massive blame culture. There is an element of trust that needs to be there. And I think this is the biggest factor, right? You have a psychological safety is the sort of a keenly used phrase at the moment. And I quite like it. I think it summarizes quite a lot. But when you have got psychological safety, that is because there is a lot of trust in the room.
Yes.
And that allows people to be honest, to be open. I would say I'm trying to think of an exception to the statement I'm about to make, and I'm sure there will be one. But I'm sure there'll be one, and this is just my personal experience, not all of mankind's experience. But when you have that environment, people tend to perform much better and learn much more quickly, and so therefore progress much more quickly. So I think it is possible.
But you've also just spoken from somebody who's very secure in what they're doing. Because I feel like people are so insecure. Let's talk about team dynamics. And I was just in a leadership position. I was I was a chairperson of the New York Staff Association for UNICEF. So this is one of the headquarters, etc. And it was a tough year last year because we had to let go of so many people. And somehow I found myself in this leadership position, which I was not expecting it to be like this at all. And I'm dealing with management, and I'm trying to look at all the staff. I had 3,500-ish staff that I was representing. it was like literally, it was a really crazy year last year to be doing something like this when everybody was losing their jobs. But one of the points that I kept banging on about over and over again was exactly trust and psychological safety, because management was like, staff were getting really upset in all the different town halls we were happening and stuff like that. They were like, they're hiding something. Why won't they tell us what's going on? What's happening? And again, talking about resilience and change, and that none of this is overnight, talking about psychological safety also, and trust. These are not things that get built overnight. When you are a leader, when you are also just within a team, building these dynamics over time is so critically important. And how do you build that trust? And how open? And this I always find interesting as a leader. How much information, and it's not like you're hiding things, but not everything needs to be out there in the open. There were things I was doing in the background, and I was just like, I'm just going to hold on to this here. But as much as I felt like I could tell the staff, I made sure that they all knew what was happening, what was going on, the kinds of negotiations I was involved in on their behalf. And there's also just too much survey fatigue that can also happen in a situation like this, where the organization, especially an organization as big as, let's say, UNICEF or a government or any of the organizations you probably work with, staff get really tired of being like in surveys over and over again and not seeing any change. And I think that's where leadership really matters, because I know this is part of what we wanted to talk about today also. And the places where I've seen myself successfully be a leader is find that balance between how much do I put out to people. First of all, build trust. 100% build trust, build psychological safety so that anybody feels like they can come to me and talk to me at any given moment in time. And I will address that issue, and they will see it might not be a conclusion. It might not be a resolution they want to see, but it has been discussed, and this is what can be done about it. You may not like the answer, but this is what I can do. Having things like this, I think, are incredibly important. Yeah. Within an organization, looking at it as a leader as well, building resilience, all these things are so incredibly interconnected. And being kind, leading with love and kindness. This is what I kept saying last year over and over again, where I was like, I know what it can look like. I know what everybody else is doing. And a lot of people, like I just said, you're coming at this from a position of security. There's so many insecure people, and people were being mean to each other and all of this and blah, blah. And I was just like, I am going to lead with love and kindness. And that was always the framework I gave myself, where I was just like, before you say anything, before you type anything, before you address people, before you start a meeting or whatever, center yourself in love and kindness, and then see where that goes. And that, I feel, was really bringing trust. I communicated that out to people all the time, and it created the psychological safety that you're talking about.
I think there's a couple of key things in there. One is that balance of transparency with trust, right? I've been in organizations where there's probably too much transparency. It actually generates insecurity and doubt.
Yes.
But similarly, if there's a fear that people are hiding things, then it undermines the trust as well. That's a difficult one to balance. But in terms of that clear principle of love and kindness that you were bringing to your leadership, and then being very consistent in that message, I've heard that in a few of the conversations I've on this podcast, just the importance of that. And I definitely can think of some leaders that I've had where I could tell you now, years and years later, exactly what it was they were standing for at that time, because they were so clear and consistent.
Yeah.
That's one of the skills or traits of leadership. What would you consider the role of leadership to be overall in an organization or a group of people?
For me, this is one of the biggest ones. You have to be it's what I was just saying also, right? And I was not giving it the term accountability. People want to see somebody who is going to be accountable. You made a decision, you took an organization or a team down a certain path, then you need to be accountable you need to own those decisions. And if they were wrong, that's fine. Step up. Not everybody's right all the time. It's okay. You stand up and say that you were wrong. And there's a certain amount of vulnerability that comes with that. And I think that's still okay. And I don't see people, I've again worked with some great leaders, and then I worked with some really awful leaders where I'm just like, man, this does not have to look like this. You literally could just step up and be like, mea culpa, and then we can all move on. And this is the whole can you fail forward in public also? Treat it like that. Bring in that growth mindset. Do not mindlessly be like, no, this is what we're doing. And if you need to course correct, go ahead and do it. Nobody's going to look at you and be like, oh no, you did bad, or you did. It's people would rather you course correct. And it's okay. Just keep moving. You are human too, just like everybody else is. And also, listen. I need leaders to listen. This, for me, is also critically important. It's one of the traits I think that need to be there. But I would say accountability, I want to almost say, like, in terms of what a leader should bring, what a leader should do, that can cover so much, actually, just to even begin with. Then the trust can come in there, the psychological safety can come in there, because yeah, if you are just accountable for the decisions you are making, if you're able to explain them, the clarity that I was talking about, it goes a long way in terms of what a leader should be doing.
I think there are lots of different places where people are either blind to the needs to change direction, they are not blind but unwilling, and that unwillingness might be for various reasons, or they just don't have the ability to change direction. A story that keeps coming up for me a lot at the moment is Jeff Bezos was, I think, 6 years into the Amazon journey, and he had Jeff Wilkie, his COO, and the COO said to Jeff Bezos, look, you've got so many ideas, you could sink Amazon because you're just not releasing them at a pace the team can actually take them on board. So it becomes a massive, they don't know what they're doing anymore, and it's all too complicated. And Jeff Bezos obviously didn't have the ability in himself to recognize that, but he put someone good around him to be able to speak truth to power. And I think that is a vital part of leadership, bringing complementary skills around you. But in terms of where we are, and I say socially rather than societally, I think we're in a place that there are a lot of people who don't seem comfortable with putting their hand up and say, maybe this is not the direction we should be going in. And either I'm not the person for this then, or I'm still the person for this, but follow me, we're going this way instead.
No, and many people won't do that. Where are we socially? I do want to come back to that question because I think it's a good one. We are in a moment where everything is on social media literally all the time. This is why I think it becomes so much harder also for people to be their authentic selves. But our attention spans are completely wrecked, which is where we are socially, which is why when with leaders and what they're trying to look at and the state of leadership in the world, I think it's really hard because people always want to feel relevant. And so they feel like they have to project a certain way, and vulnerability maybe is not one of those things that plays out there. Being human, being imperfect when everything is so curated, I think it makes it really difficult, and everything has to be like a soundbite, and not everybody can do that either. I'll stop there with where are we socially, but yeah, for me, I think that has such a huge impact in what leadership has looked like. I do think it's changing. My niece, she's 14, almost 15. She's not into Instagram and TikTok as much, which I am thankful for. She wants to do things in person with people. This is the generation that was growing up with COVID. They missed so much school as they were growing up, and all socialization that needs to happen. But I see a lot more people now saying, you know what, let's meet in person. Let's do these things in person. And I think sitting in the room with people, eye to eye with people, not having anonymous comments coming at you, etc., it should hopefully change the tenor of what we see with leadership now.
Well, I think it's a very worthy hope to have, for sure. You're talking about leadership there. You've been in leadership positions in various different contexts and situations. If you look back at those, is there anything that stands out as like the biggest challenge that you've had?
People.
Just generally people. That is the whole.
I love people, but then I think, one of the biggest challenges is just realizing that people are actually quite selfish. But I know this and I mitigate for it. And I also try and find the people who are not selfish. But this is where, and people are insecure. Don't let yourself shine any less just because of other people's insecurity. This, for me, has been one of the biggest challenges, but also one of the biggest lessons, and something that I would do differently moving forward is don't let somebody else's insecurity make me shine any less than what I do. And just to believe in, it's so hokey when you say this, but honestly, believe in yourself and trust your own gut instinct around these sorts of things. If you find yourself regularly being put into leadership positions, even when you haven't asked for them, you're doing something correct. Trust what that is. Go with that feeling and just go for it. And leaders are people, they are Sometimes leadership has often come to me. Yes, I've been hired into leadership positions, et cetera, but oftentimes it's happening because people I'm working with are just like, oh, you can actually do this. Can you please continue? And then I just get internally promoted or whatever it is. It's not like I'm often not looking for it actually, but then it's something that just starts happening. But yeah, that doesn't quite answer the challenge is, yeah, people, yeah, it's such a crazy thing to say, but yeah, people are actually the challenge when it comes to leadership.
Well, people are the reason for needing leadership in the first place as
Yes.
well, I would
Yes.
argue. In terms of the different deployments that you've done, like working in loads of different places after lots of different disasters, do any of them stand out as being, significantly more challenging than any other?
They're all challenging in their Palestine. Palestine.
And
It
when were you
was,
there? When were you working on that?
I went in over the years I have been, but I was
Mm,
actually on the ground in Jerusalem. It was not 2025, 2024. I think, I want to say it was November. This was part of my global role and what I was
mm,
doing. And yeah, I was staying with a friend over there. I was only there for 2 weeks. I was helping write RDNA is the Rapid Disaster Needs Assessment. It's something that the World Bank, the UN, and the European Union sit down together and they write in all the different countries. Gaza was still an ongoing situation. There was no ceasefire, nothing was happening, but we were trying to think of what can come next. I was in a situation that was just tough. That
mm.
I don't even know how to, I don't know how. And I said this to everybody that was there for the longer term because they're all witness to what is happening over there. They had a front row seat to the genocide. And I was like, I don't know how you continue to keep doing what you were doing without completely losing your minds. And
Mm.
I think it was a political crisis more than a humanitarian crisis. And it's, yeah, I think that was just tough because it felt like I've never felt that helpless in my whole entire life. So yeah. Other than
Yeah,
that, I've always had, I know, yes, I work in conflict. I work near, this is what I try and explain because people are like, how do you witness all these things? How do you see all these things? And I was like, I don't know how to explain to people that I see the best of people at their worst times. And sometimes I see the worst of people too. I'm somebody who believes in people. And this was like a tongue-in-cheek thing that I was saying. The problem with leadership is people. But I really have seen I've seen some incredible things. You want to talk about resilience? You look at people after a disaster. Oh my God. The kinds of things I have learned, that is what I hold on to when I personally need to keep going. And I've seen most of the major disasters in conflict disasters, but also natural disasters. I've been on the ground for a vast majority of them. And it is incredible being around people going through something like that. And that's what I take back with me in my own life then, where I was just like, "Okay, it's not as bad as that." It was like, if people can be smiling, showing up and looking really well dressed when you know their house was just destroyed, it's
hmm
really incredible. And what a privilege, actually, to me to be able to work in these sorts of environments.
yeah. I think that post event period, the the way that people do tend to come together, the way that people, yeah, it's a
Incredible.
it's
Yeah.
a brutal way of prioritizing what's important in life, but people do seem to come together very effectively after those periods of time. I mean,
Yeah.
it sticks in my mind. I went to a village that had been affected by landslides in Sri Lanka back in 2017, I think, and 300 people in the village, 25 of them been killed overnight,
Yeah.
just in seconds as the landslide came. And the dad's with his daughter, and he's just showing me where he literally had pulled her into the house just because he happened to be pulling her into the house, and this landslide came and took away where she'd just been stood, and she survived. And you just think the stories that come out are just
Yeah.
horrific, to be honest, but also a lot of very inspiring stuff. I think the other thing that I was speaking to one of my coaching clients the other day, excuse me, and just talking about the importance of recognizing time in everything that will allow things to heal. And
Yeah.
so just being confident that when you're having an awful day or you're seeing something terrible, this is not the last thing that's staying with you for the rest of your life. Things will continue to change. But it takes a lot sometimes to have confidence in that process, and you have to be incredibly patient as well, because there's no
Yeah.
quick fixes to either the physical needs in
Yeah.
many cases or those emotional needs.
Yeah. Yeah, I talk about resilience and I'm like, I'm so resilient. I'm burnt out twice, but I knew it was for me to be able to get back to where I needed to get back, etc. It was time. And that's what
Mm,
I'm doing right now also, right? I could feel myself. This is why I stepped down from the staff association position. It literally was taking over my whole entire life. It was really high pressure, high everything, high energy. And I was like, okay. But I was 100% burning out. And I recognized the signs in myself. And I was like, okay. And currently, I am unemployed by choice because I was just like, I need some time to rebuild everything, to look at my own and this is how I'm building back my own resilience. I have not waited till I went down to zero where I'm just lying around and like because I've been there 100% and I promised myself I would not go back there. I've made sure to work out a lot because it was something I was ignoring. I'm looking at my eating, I'm making sure I'm hanging out with friends, I'm getting a lot of sunshine. For me to be at 100%, 110% to be able to get out there and do this kind of work again, this is what I need to do for myself. And I know that. In fact, it's, yeah, the whole entire self-care that we talk about, etc. This is so incredibly important. And this is my version of it right now, where I was like, I need to do this. Otherwise, I'm just not, you're like literally squeezing out the last drops. And I could see myself doing that. And I was like, I need to stop. So being able to recognize that also incredibly important.
I think self-awareness as part of
Yeah.
resilience is absolutely vital, and being able to take the measures. I think this is where a lot of people struggle with. They often know, but they wait for an external event like a
Yeah.
health scare to
Yeah.
change something.
Or they think
Um,
it's weakness if they
I,
take some time.
well,
It's not.
that was exactly the point I was going to make.
Yeah.
It is something people feel judged for
Yeah.
by acknowledging where their shortcomings or where their needs
Yeah.
are, and to not try and meet those needs. I think is remiss, especially when you have other people relying on you as well. It's very
Exactly
important.
that. Yeah. It's self-awareness for yourself, but also for your team. And then again, it's creating that psychological safety within your team. And this is why I talk about it out loud, saying, I have burnt out. I know I'm very, but I did it and I won't do it again. So this is how
Mm.
I'm taking the steps to make sure. And anybody who's worked with me knows I'm not a weakling or this or that. It's everybody knows I'm a high performer. So I'm like, but this is how I high perform. And
Mm.
people can figure it out for themselves and what they need to do, etc. But take the breaks. There's nothing wrong with doing that, but then create a space within a team for it to be normalized for people to be able to do that. Especially, and I've seen so many times in a disaster, and it's been so nice to go in 6 months later also, and you can reset a team and be like, I know you guys have been working hard because it's really hard for a team to reset also. That's just
Yeah.
gonna go. Then you can come in and be like, okay, now we're going to take weekends, everybody. And if not the whole weekend, we're at least going to take a day because you cannot continue at the same pace. Not everything is an emergency. You don't have to respond to everything now. Let's look at where we're going, what we're doing. And I think that's the changes that I was also talking about. Different people need to actually come in for different places. And I think resilience is built when you do that within everybody, within the organization, also within your team, also. But that's what leadership also looks like, saying, I'm good for this. I can do this for you and this for you. But then you need somebody else to come in and you can step aside. People don't do that. And I have seen people who do it. But I think that's what, yeah, builds trust, builds leadership, builds resilience.
I think that point about how people get into a certain
Yeah.
routine and then find it very difficult to get out of it, even when it is very actually unnecessary and damaging,
Yeah.
is really important. Just honing in on. And yeah, again, seen this done very well, seen this done not so well, and I've been part of well, and I've been part of not doing it well. And it's hard sometimes to come in because it means you're starting to have to say no to things that have become a norm, and
Yeah.
people feel a commitment,
Yeah.
particularly to when it's for an affected population. I think it's different when it's make sure the shareholders are getting their dividends, right? But it's when you're dealing with people affected by a disaster or a crisis,
Yeah.
it'd be very difficult to stop doing that and start resetting in a different direction. Oh, this has been amazing. It's great to speak with you and hear your experiences and your views of things. I've got a few more questions as we look to wrap up. So the first one is, what skills or character traits do you think matter the most for navigating the world we're in and the world that's coming?
Empathy is going to be skill number one. And people are like, either you're born with it or no, you can learn empathy. Learn to empathize. It's fine. It is soft skills can be learned. I think soft skills are so underrated, and they absolutely need to be front and center right now, especially with AI and technology and everything that's coming. Empathy is up there in terms of the skill set. I think creative thinking is something that, again, with AI and what Claude and ChatGPT, et cetera, can do for us, I think it's great. I'm not saying we shouldn't be embracing technology, but you need to have your own creative thinking and outlets for your own creativity to be coming forth. Curiosity is the other one. I think people absolutely need to remain curious. It's too easy. Information, again, I love that information is so readily available, but curiosity is where all the great thoughts are going to come through, where we can learn, where we can grow. Having that growth mindset, I think, is another really important key skill set and trait that we need to have now and going into the future. There was another, oh yeah, flexibility and being adaptable. If you can't do these things, it's going to be really hard for you. I think this is, again, we talked about this in terms of resilience, and which for me, this is a huge thing. You have to remain flexible going into the future because you don't know what it's going to hold and what it's looking at, and you're going to lose out on opportunities. I'm somebody who loves who can just say yes to something. I'm like, okay, I haven't done this before, but yeah, let's try it. Let's see what happens, and just going for it. So I think that sort of flexibility in your thinking and what you want to take on is going to be quite critical.
That's fantastic. Thank you. And so I'm going to close with my last question. And I think there is some overlap with the prior one, but I very specifically get this one out as a relatively new parent. So what advice would you give to a 2-year-old girl growing up in the world we're building right now?
Oh, I love that question. Share, be kind, be loving. Looking at the world that we are in and the connections that we will continue to need to have with people, even as technology is trying to pull us apart on that, sharing, learning, it's such a great skill to have, is learn how to share and to be kind and to be loving, which I'm sure she gets that from her parents anyways. But that's the kind of advice, that I would be giving to any parents of a 2-year-old. Teach your kids these things.
I love that, Zehra. Thank you so much. It's a fantastic
Yay.
way to close off. Thank you so much for coming on this. It's great to see you. Great to hear your experiences, your thoughts, share your wisdom. And if anyone wants to get hold of you, how do they best do that?
Yeah, they can find me on LinkedIn. You can put it on your podcast, whatchamacallit. LinkedIn has turned into a little bit of a cesspool these days, but every 2-3 weeks, I do get on there and check things. So yes, absolutely. You can find me on LinkedIn. It does exist for me. Other social media I've just taken off. And Charlie, thank you so much. I'm so glad. I know I started by saying I'm so glad you're doing this, but after this whole conversation and the ways in which you've had me reflect on things, this is fabulous that you're doing this. And I'm very jealous of all your coaching clients that you have right now. Let me get a job and then I will come and be your client also. But yeah, this is absolutely fabulous. And thank you so much for having me on here.
I appreciate your time. It's great to see you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
If this conversation has given you something to think about leading through pressure, navigating change, or building the kind of clarity that holds even when things get tough, that is exactly what I work on at The Resilient Edge. You can find me, Charlie Peschardt, on LinkedIn, on Instagram at The Resilient Edge Coaching, or via my website, theresilientedge.com. Whether you're looking to think more clearly under pressure in your personal or professional life, or leading an organisation building the resilience to survive and thrive through uncertainty and change, come find me and sharpen your resilient edge.